Next, I guess I should introduce myself. I met some of you guys, but I'm Annie.
I'm June.
And we're going to be talking to you about date rape drugs. So this is a pretty heavy topic, but let's unpack it and talk about it, because hopefully you guys might have to deal with some of these issues. So let's first talk about, so what is a date rape drug? Well, that is any drug used in association with a sexual assault or to commit a sexual assault. So then you guys probably ask, can any drug be used as a date rape drug? And the fact of the matter is that yes, it can, right? Drugs change our consciousness and our physical abilities. And so any drug can be used to commit a sexual assault or in association with. And so I just also want to touch on this, is that does date rape only occur when drugs are involved? And the fact of the matter is no. Date rape can occur with physical or psychological coercion, but we're going to be talking to you about drugs, particularly two, alcohol and roofies, most common or most frequently date rape drugs. So the ultimate thing that I guys want you to be thinking about as we go through this is, how do we recognize consent, right? We all need to consent in order for to engage in a sexual act. So let's talk about, what is sexual assault? Well, that is any sex act, any sexual act that occurs without your clear and expressed consent. Okay, so now we're coming back to this. What is consent? Well, that's like clear and unambiguous yes. And importantly, that yes needs to be met with both mental and physical capability. So if you're mentally incapacitated, either through drugs, or physically incapacitated through drugs or alcohol, right? It removes your ability to consent. So then let's ask, how do drugs influence consent? So I kind of just answered that, but can you guys just call it back to me? How do you think drugs influence consent? Yeah.
And you're saying no, but your body's saying yes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So when you're either very drunk or under the influence of drugs, you're unconscious. Your brain isn't how you are when you're sober, right? And you maybe can't physically move. And so that, by the very nature of consent, removes your ability. Yeah. So let's go on. So I'm going to talk to you more specifically about alcohol, which is the #1 drug that is associated with sexual assault. So let's talk about how it works with your brain. So you guys remember this lock and key mechanism that we talked to you about. So a neurotransmitter comes in, dopamine, serotonin, acts on your brain cells through this lock, unlocks it, and then it produces a change in your brain cell. Either activates it to communicate with other brain cells or quiets it down. Now alcohol comes on board, interacts with that lock and key mechanism, and suppresses, quiets your brain cells. So it dampens neural activity, your brain's activity that's normally occurring. And what this ultimately means is that messages in your brain get lost. And communication between cells, if you shut a brain cell off, you can't communicate with the next guy in line. So messages and communication are going to slow down, just like with benzodiazepines, slowing down. So what this leads to is unfiltered behavior. So normally you guys, when you engage in any interaction or you're trying to make a decision, you think of costs and benefits, right? It's probably not a good idea right now for me to stand up and get out and walk away, right? So this depression of the brain removes this filter, as I said. Next one. So understanding or assessing situations becomes a little bit blurred. So let's say, when you guys are sober and somebody hits you on the shoulder in the hallway, you think, oh, they didn't see me, they didn't mean to hit me. But now, when somebody is very, very drunk, that shoulder bump might be interpreted as an aggressive act, and now I might need to fight this person. Or it can also make you engage in risky decisions. So jumping off the roof of a house into a pool sounds like a horrible decision right now, right? Why would I risk my body? I could die, I could injure myself and lose maybe a sports scholarship. Bad idea. But now with that filter removed, your brain is depressed, those sorts of thoughts don't take into the equation, and so you're more likely to engage in risky decisions. And ultimately, underlining this unfiltered behavior and the effects of alcohol in the brain ultimately removes your ability to consent to sex. So there's two types of things you guys might have heard of: passing out and blacking out. So when you suppress the brain, when you quiet the brain activity so much so, your brain really, literally becomes unconscious. You are no longer conscious. And you can also quiet the brain or dampen it, slow it down so much that you can't physically move anymore. And so that's what's happened to this individual right here. He is unconscious and cannot move. Do you think this guy could consent to sex?
No.
No. Let's hear it a little louder.
No.
Very good. Great. Too drunk. Absolutely. So there's another situation called blacking out, where the brain is dampened, quiet so much that they're unconscious, but somebody can still physically move. So I could be walking around, looking you in the eyes, talking. Maybe it's a little slurred. Maybe not so coordinated. But for all appearances, I can still move. Do you think somebody like that can still consent to sex?
No.
A little louder.
No.
No. Great. Okay. So in either of these scenarios, consent cannot be given. So another thing that occurs through the slowing of the brain is that it impairs the brain's connections that are formed, which are memories. And so through either of these states, either passing out or blacking out, can lead to memory impairments. Okay, so you guys have probably heard it's not a good idea to drink while pregnant, right? It's going to influence the fetuses, your baby's brain development. Well, that brain development occurs throughout your whole life, and a large portion is occurring right now. Very critical time for brain development. So alcohol, particularly in the teen periods, can drastically affect the connections that are formed in your brain and the development that's supposed to be taking place. So it can influence, drinking during this time can influence decision making and your likelihood to become an addict throughout your entire life. So it's very important to remember that why perhaps drinking after 25 produces different effects on your brain than drinking during this period right now. So let's debunk some of the myths you guys might have heard about alcohol. So who thinks, yell out true or false to this? So coffee or other stimulants can counteract the effects of alcohol and sober you up.
No.
Who says true? Who says false?
False.
False. Great job. Absolutely false. Let's go to the next one. So you should report sexual assault even if you were drinking underage or using illegal drugs. True. Absolutely and absolutely true. Report it to a safe person, particularly if it first occurred, seek medical attention. But I just want to briefly talk about who's the safe person. So a safe person is somebody that does not blame you, that doesn't judge, that urges you to speak out, and continues to provide that support throughout that entire experience. Okay, so having only one drink can put you over the legal limit to drive. True or false? True. What's the legal blood alcohol content for you guys right now? What?
No.
That's the age to drink. Do you know how much alcohol you're allowed in your blood system if you're driving? Yeah.
0.08.
That is if you're over 21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you guys are 0, right? You're not supposed to be drinking. Yeah, over 21, you can have 0.08 blood alcohol content. Okay, so when Mira was talking about benzodiazepines, now alcohol, so these things suppress your brain. They're depressant, what we call, as neuroscientists, depressants. So does that mean that alcohol being classified as a depressant makes you sad or depressed?
False.
False. Absolutely. Great. So that just means that it's slowing your brain down. That's when drugs are classified as depressants, that's what they're doing. Alcohol obviously can make you sad and depressed, but that's when we say it's a depressant, that means that's what it's doing to your brain. So now Jim's going to talk to you guys about roofies.
Alright, so Annie has talked to you about alcohol, now I'm going to talk to you about Rohypnol. So before I start my presentation, I just want to preface it by saying that a lot of things that I'm going to go over you might have already heard of from other people, but that's okay because the topic that we're going over, the sexual assault, is a very important topic, and we want to kind of emphasize some of the things that we're going to go over. So first thing is, what is Rohypnol? Can anyone tell me what another common name for Rohypnol might be? Roofies. Yeah, so Annie kind of said it, ruined it, but yeah. So another name for Rohypnol is roofies. And just going over some background information. So in countries outside of the United States, Rohypnol or roofies is used as a treatment for insomnia and for pre-surgery anesthetic. So it has a medical use outside of the United States. But in the United States, it's actually illegal. So that's something to keep in mind. So Rohypnol or roofies is a date rape drug. So just as a review, can anyone tell me what the definition of a date rape drug is?
Any drug that is used for sexual sex.
Yes, that's exactly correct. So a date rape drug.
So stating of the highly used.
So a date rape drug, as you said, is any drug that is used to perform sexual assault, as it takes away the person's ability to consent to sexual assault, sexual activity. So another characteristic of Rohypnol or roofies is that it's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. And one of the common ways that roofies or Rohypnol is used is, as you might already know, is using dissolving drinks and alcohol, right? So if it's dissolving drinks or alcohol, drinks such as alcohol, and if it's odorless, colorless, and tasteless, that means it's virtually undetectable to the human eye or smell, nose. So companies have been trying to put dyes in the Rohypnol tablets to make it more visible, but this is still a prominent problem with Rohypnol. So what are its effects? So the effects are very similar to alcohol in terms of its depressing effects on your nervous system. But one thing that I want to emphasize is that you can't remember what happened while you were taking the drugs. After you took the drug, you're not going to be able to remember what the events that took place while you were under the effects of the drug. So one other thing that I want to emphasize is that Rohypnol or roofies can be lethal with alcohol. So as Amir has talked about with Xanax and alcohol being lethal, it's the same thing where both drugs are nervous system depressants, and it overall causes an effect so great that it could be lethal with alcohol. So how does it work? So this is the lock and key diagram again. So you have a key neurotransmitter binding onto the lock, which is the receptor. So in the same manner as alcohol, Rohypnol will bind to the receptor, and it will cause an overall depressing effect on your nervous system. So now if you have alcohol together, it will bind to the receptor again, and it will basically cause an overall enhanced negative effect, negative consequences on your nervous system. So lastly, I want to go over what do you think you do if you think you've been drugged. So if you think you've been drugged, there are 3 key things that you should go over. The first thing is you should get medical help as soon as possible. So if you don't think that you yourself could seek for medical help, try to find someone safe to rely on to get medical help for you, such as your friend who's next to you. And the next thing is to make sure you report the situation to the police, as sexual assault is a very serious matter and we want to get that reported. And the third thing is, after everything, make sure you get counseling and treatment. So the pamphlets that we have for you will have hotlines and websites that you can use for counseling and treatment that you can use to refer later on. So I just went over what you should do if you think you've been drugged, but what should you do if you think someone else has been drugged? So let's say you're at a club or at a party and you think that your friend has been drugged. What should you do? Does anyone have any thoughts on what the first thing you should do is? Yeah.
Call police, call the parents.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you should do. Anything else?
Just brain something. Somebody have an answer?
What did you say?
You get another one.
I change my color.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's very similar to what I went over in the last slide. You should be seeking for medical help for the person and reporting the situation. But the first thing that you should do is actually get the person out of the scene of the situation. So if you're at a party or a club, make sure that you get them to a safe location first. So maybe out of the party or the club, and then you try to seek for medical help for the person, so that you could prevent further progressing of the possible case of sexual assault. So what if you see someone that's not your friend at a club or party, but you suspect that they've been sexually assaulted? What should you do? Call the police, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what you should do. So even if they're not your friend, you should try your best to prevent that possible case of sexual assault. We don't want you to get yourself in trouble too, so some things that you could do indirectly are possibly talk to someone that's you deem as safe or reliable, such as the party host or maybe call the police, to make sure that that person will be safe as soon as possible. Thank you.